The meeting to order. If Linda, are you ready?
We'll go ahead and start calling the meeting to order.
I'm ready.
Okay, we're going to start with item 2 with the Pledge of Allegiance, and because of going with the Zoom, I'm just going to go ahead and recite it myself. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item 3, roll call, Linda.
Rich Rossway,
Here.
James Randall.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as stated.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Randall, supported by Mrs. Kimbenzi. We have to do a roll call vote for this, Linda?
Yes, we do.
Support.
Rich Rossway,
Yes.
James Randall,
Yes.
Kristen Kimbenzi,
Yes.
Dr. Brian Cherry,
Yes.
Glenn Sarka,
Yes.
Michael Kohler, James Randall, Kristen Kimbenzi, Dr. Brian Cherry.
Getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, there's definitely a delay.
Yeah, I'm like hearing myself talk after I talk, which is incredibly annoying.
Yes.
No, I know how you guys feel.
I was getting ready to say the same thing.
So I'm still on the roll call. Michael Kohler,
Yeah, there's definitely a delay.
Yes. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Here, we got you, Mike.
we got you, Mike.
Okay.
There's definitely a delay, so I think Elijah was talking about if somebody is doing a live stream in addition on YouTube, that could be impacting it versus being on the Zoom meeting. So I don't know.
Go ahead and mute if you're not talking. That would help, I think.
Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move forward then. Item number 5, Superintendent's Report. Mr. Saunders.
I'm going to let Deb Berry introduce Annette, and we'll get started with the audit report by Raymond.
Mike and I are sharing a computer here. So I am going to take over here for a moment just to introduce Annette Eustace from the Raymond Group. She will be doing the board presentation of the audit this evening. And I will be, Annette, I should ask the question, are you expecting that I will do your PowerPoint presentation screen share?
Nope, I'll do it. Is that all right if I do it?
No? Okay.
Okay, good.
Then I will turn it over to, okay. I'll turn it over to Annette, and I believe Ellie. Yep.
Okay. Can you see my screen, Richard?
Yep.
Yes? Okay, great. Well, thank you for inviting me tonight to make the presentation. It's a disappointment that I don't get to see you all in person, but I didn't really miss the 3.5-hour ride up today and the 3.5-hour ride back either. But it's been a great couple of months working with Deb and your staff, and I hope to share some of the highlights of the financial report with you today. And then if you have any questions, I don't believe you had the audit report itself prior to maybe Friday or today, so you might not have had a chance to read through it. So if you have questions after you do read through it, just let Deb know or let me know, and I'd be happy to talk with you about them. Also, because I am summarizing tonight, I will also reference the page numbers of the audit report if you want to make note. Linda's going to share this presentation with you, so you can go back then and reference the appropriate pages as you go along. Oops. The auditor's report is on pages 1 through 3 of your financial statement. And basically it states that we believe that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects with respect to the financial position of Marquette schools. We call that an unmodified or a clean opinion. In school terms, that would be an A. So you had no particular misstatements that we found to be in need of repair. We also, as a part of the financial statement audit, performed the audit of the sinking fund and bond construction fund as required by the State of Michigan Department of Education. And we believe that the expenditures compiled and all the necessary requirements were there, and they were audited in depth. As you look through your statements today, and I will reference this later in the presentation, the district implemented what we call GASB 84 this year. GASB stands for Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and that's a new standard applicable to your financial statements for the year. And it required basically that you restate your student activity funds to be included in the general fund. So you'll see that your beginning fund balance is different than it was in the prior financial statement, and there's a footnote to explain that. Oh boy, my fingers are just way too fast. The MD&A, which is included on pages 4 through 11, is more of a narrative description of the district's activities for the year, drafted by management rather than the auditors. This gives an opportunity for management to give their perspective on the financial activities of the district for the 2020 or the 1920 school year, and also to provide some comparison data with the prior year and an explanation of any significant changes. So I do encourage you to sacrifice your Friday night party nights to sit down and read through that MD&A. Deb's done a very good job of documenting all of your activities in a more narrative form. And we've talked the last couple of years about the effect that the pension plan has on your financial statements. Your net pension liability, which is all of the amounts due to all of the employees of the district over time, is $63.6 million, and it's up from $57.8 million in the prior year. You also offer a net OPEB, which is another post-employment benefit, which is your healthcare program. And that liability is $14 million, is actually down from the prior year when it was $15.1 million. So I'll show you in a minute how that impacts your financial statements. If you have any questions as we go along tonight, don't hesitate to stop me and holler out. The net position, which is kind of what we would call a balance sheet, is on page 12 of your financial statement. And your total net position was a $36.7 million deficit, which is caused by your pension. So what has really happened here is you show a $36.7 million deficit. The pension liability, which is causing that deficit, and the OPEB is about 63.3 million. So if you basically netted those, you would otherwise have a positive net position of about 26.6%. And so many people call that, you know, a paper transaction because you don't really have a lot of control over it. It is estimated by the state, and you are provided with the numbers that go into the footnote and the financial statement entries. But you know, the bottom line is you have a pretty good sized deficit, and it's all plus caused by your pension liability. The change in net position was 2.5 million decrease from the prior year. Again, almost all caused by the adjustments required from the pension liability. Total revenues for the district for the year were $38.1 million, up about 1.1 million from the prior year. And total expenses were 40.5 million, up from 37.8 million in the prior year. And most of the increase in your expenses, again, was attributable to that net pension adjustment to the liability. Most districts measure or monitor their growth and their activity by the fund level rather than that overall government-wide level. So this is a nice summary of your balance sheets from at the fund level. General fund had assets of almost 0.144 million, liabilities of 5.17 million. Now that does not take into consideration the pension fund, any capital assets, or any long-term debt. These fund levels are current type financial statements. So your fund balance is $8.97 million in the general fund. Of that 8.79 million, you had about 3.3 million that is unrestricted and available for the general use of the district. The rest of it is in various categories, which are disclosed on footnote 13 on page 47. 109,000 of it is non-spendable because it's not in the nature of cash. So that involves prepaid expenses and some inventory. Then you've got about almost $2 million that is restricted, which means it is restricted by law for a specific use. And most of that is the fund balance in your food service and debt service funds, and then some for the planetarium. Majority of it was planetarium. Then there's some that is committed by the board, about 4.4 million, which is contingencies, the student balances that weren't in there last year, they would have been in the back in student activity funds, and then some capital projects. And then some assigned fund balance to the tune of about 1.9 million, mainly for capital projects and working capital, real small amount for the planetarium. And then, like I said, the rest of it is unassigned. From a revenues and expenses or an income statement perspective, the general fund had $35,361,000. And this is on page 16 of your financial statement. And you would need to add the revenues and the other financing sources, which is mainly transfers in to tie to that number. The bottom line, though, will tie to the 1.602 million in your net change. So very positive net changes over the past year. Budget to actual results are shown on page 18 of your financial statements. Your budgeted revenues and other financing sources were about 34.7 million. Your actual revenues were about 35.361 million. So you had a positive $589,000 variance. A lot of that was the state reduction and then the flip to federal awards for the COVID related grants. Budgeted expenditures were 35 million, and you actually only had 34.5, again, a variance of about $558,000. So the budgeted change in fund balance was a loss. You planned on a loss of about 308,000. You came in at a gain of about 840,000. So it's a positive fluctuation of about 1.1 million. Quite a bit of that is attributable to the COVID funding. Your debt footnote is on number 9 on page 36, and it outlines the changes in your debt from last year to this year. Your total outstanding principal on your bond issue is $5,810,000, and that will be spread through to 2031. You paid off $485,000 on that bond last year. You also have accrued compensated absences as a component of your debt, and that balance went down by about $25,000 to $514,000 over the past year. And you also do have a small amount of premium on your bond, which is being amortized over the life of the bond. Again, that's on note 9 on page 36 if you want to reference that for later. The other activity that isn't shown in the fund financial statements, but is included in the government-wide financial statements are your fixed assets or your capital assets. Detail of your capital assets can be found in footnote number 8 on pages 35 and 36 of your financial report. You did have $21 million in net capital assets. That's assets less the related accumulated depreciation, and added approximately $1 million in current assets over the past year. You also have some construction in progress as of June 30th, and a commitment to complete that to the tune of about $813,000 to finish those projects. That's also included in that footnote. Any questions? Okay. Dropping then just to some well, for heaven's sakes, there we go. Some other matters that may be of interest to you with respect to this past year and what's going to happen going forward. As of June 30th of 2020, or the June 30th, 2020 revenues included a $175 per pupil reduction in state aid, which equated to about $566,000. That luckily was replaced by $362 in per pupil restricted coronavirus relief funds, which have to be expended by December 30th of 2020. And that's the $1,171,000. So when you subtract those two, that explains the change in your budget to actual, or most of it. Also, there was other Esser funds which were awarded, and those need to be expended by September 30th of 2021. And if you don't already, haven't already heard that a lot, Esser stands for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds related to COVID. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening with my little pointer here, but it's bouncing all over the place. There we go. A $65 per pupil increase was included in your 2021 school aid budget to help with the changes that have been made, and it did not change your foundation allowance, which is $8,111. For fiscal year 6/30/2022, CREC, which is the Capital Regional Educational Council, has estimated that the school aid fund will have a $185.5 million ending balance, while our state's general fund will show a $1.1 billion deficit. So more to come on the changes in your state aid for the 2022 year. For this year, the student count rules changed a little bit. In the past, we had, I believe, 90%, 20% or 10% split. And then this year it's 75% of last year's student count plus 25% of this year's student count. And that was for the purpose of making sure that districts weren't penalized for changes that in students' attendance. So they either chose other alternative learning methods or they switched school districts. So that was a method of smoothing out any significant revenue drop due to the change in student count. Flipping back to the current year for just one more minute, you were subject to single audit compliance testing this year. Any district that spends more than $750,000 in federal revenues during any given year is required to be subjected to single audit compliance, which means we have to test the compliance with federal grants, as well as your financial statement internal control compliance. Marquette District expended $1.384 million this past year in federal funds. And so through a calculation that we are required to make, your major program or your tested program this year was the child nutrition cluster. Through that testing, there were no findings or question costs. So again, an A rating for the testing that we did. There were also no findings, question cost in the financial reporting area. And that is a tribute to your management group and your accounting staff. With all of the changes that happened very close to the end of the year this year, many districts missed things, forgot to improve their internal controls, or made mistakes with their federal grants. And so you coming through without a scab is very impressive. Going forward, just a reminder with respect to federal programs to pay very close attention to your internal controls related to these new federal grants to make sure that you are in compliance. Deb has a very nice internal control booklet of what she does for federal grants normally to show that they are complying with all of the components, but those may or may not need to be updated to reflect new requirements that have occurred or changes in the way that you do things because of COVID. Finally, I do want to express a heartfelt thank you to your staff and the board for your participation in this year's audit. We, of course, like everybody else, had significant COVID changes that adjusted the way in which we performed the audit, having done a very large percentage of it either through Zoom or lots of scanning back and forth and making sure all that information was secure. And your staff did a great job of getting that all done, meeting with our groups routinely to make sure that all the information is being traded on a timely basis and that it was all what we needed to complete the audit. So kudos to your staff and the board for working with us so diligently to make sure that the audit is still a high quality audit. Does anybody have questions?
No
Well,
question.
Kim and I partnered on this year. Kim will be taking a more stronger role each year as we go forward here, as I continue to create a path to retirement maybe at some point down the road. So if you have any questions or concerns, please don't hesitate to let me or Kim know, and we'd be happy to make it better. Thanks so much for your business.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annette.
Thank you.
Welcome.
I
And
wanted
just,
to say that, Rich,
Go ahead, Deb.
I wanted to say in light that we are all remote for this meeting, Annette is coming to us from Sheboygan, Michigan. And so that's part of what we need to state to be compliant in our remote process here.
Yep, live from Sheboygan, Michigan. Here I am, Annette Eustace. Thanks so much.
Thank
Well, great job, Deb. You know, I know we didn't always have such great reports in the past, and since you've come on board, it's really been a blessing for you and your entire staff. So congratulations. Any other questions? If not, we will move on. Bill, I'll just have you continue with the superintendent's report.
Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Annette. And certainly a huge thanks goes out to Deb Berry, Janine Bledberg, and the rest of our staff here for the outstanding job they continue to do in putting those financials together for us. So definitely a real asset for the district. I need to share with you the current numbers as required by our extended learning plan. One of the things is to cover attendance and also student participation, whether that be face-to-face, virtual, or hybrid, and the change in those numbers. Gray Verret is reporting 232 students face-to-face with an average weekly attendance of 85.1%. They have 44 students who are virtual with 100% attendance and 13 hybrid students with 100% attendance. Cherry Creek Elementary, 282 face-to-face students with 88.5% attendance, 84 virtual students, 100% attendance, 22 hybrid students, 100% attendance. Sandy Knoll, an average of 270 students face-to-face, 99% attendance, 84 students virtual with 98% attendance, and 15 hybrid students with 100% attendance. Superior Hills, 271 face-to-face students, 94.25% attendance, 63 virtual students, 100% attendance, 12 hybrid students, 100% attendance. Bothwell Middle School, 541 face-to-face students, 90.5% attendance, 132 virtual students, 84% attendance, 46 hybrid students, 100% attendance. Marquette Alternative High School, 99 face-to-face students. Still working on what that percentage for attendance ratio is. They do have 36 virtual students with 100% attendance. No hybrid students at Marquette Alternative High School. Marquette Senior High School, 569 face-to-face students, 79.5% attendance. 182 virtual students. Wasn't able to get me the attendance for those virtual students. 173 hybrid students, again, about the same average, the 79.5% attendance. The other piece I need to share with you is the latest COVID numbers. We are charting these every day on our dashboard, as you guys know. We currently have 17 active cases within the district, 4 employees, 13 students, approximately a 0.52% infection for the number of students that we have. Cumulatively, we have 37 cases of active or positive and probable since September 8th. Marquette County, I reached out to Jerry Masana to get the latest data. I forwarded that data to the board. I think the most important piece to note when we go through the data, it gets reported in a wide variety of different ways, but this data certainly is lagging. In other words, as they test and they go back and they say this person was actually infected maybe 4 days ago, maybe 8 days ago, the data is going to lag. So I'm going to actually give you the last about 2 weeks worth of cases in Marquette County. On 11/3, there were 72 new cases, no deaths. 11/4, 54 new cases, no deaths. 11/5, 54 new cases, no deaths. 11/6, 66 new cases, 1 death. 11/7, 40 new cases, 0 deaths. 11/8, 25 new cases, 0 deaths. 11/9, 75 new cases, 1 death. 11/10, 56 cases, no deaths. 11/11, 35 cases, no deaths. 11/12, 27 cases, 1 death. 11/13, 20 cases, no deaths. 11/14, 4 cases, no deaths. 11/15, 5 cases, no deaths. And 11/16, today, 2 cases so far, no deaths. Understanding, especially in the near future, those numbers will go up because there is a lag in the reporting. So, and we see that happen sometime in schools where somebody goes out with symptoms, they wait a few days, maybe they get tested, and that test then takes 4, 5, 6 days to get the results back. Then they go back to that date and add those numbers in. So those numbers are certain to go up as they get reported and end up on the dashboard for the Marquette County Health Department. Any questions you guys have for me regarding the data?
Hey, Bill, just a comment, and looking at the percentage of attendance at all the schools is kind of interesting. You've got a grade school like Sandy Knoll with a 99% attendance rate for those, you know, in the school. And then we look at a Cherry Creek at 85 and Grave Red at 85. It just kind of seemed to be all over the board. I mean, Bothwell, I thought it would be lower. Bothwell's at 94%, and then the high school's at 80%. I mean, does that data tell you anything? Or have you, I just thought it was kind of interesting how varied each of those buildings were.
I will be honest, the reporting mechanisms and how to track the data for attendance has been all over the board, and the instructions that we've gotten from the state and how to log this attendance, how we're logging the virtual students, certainly even how we're logging face-to-face students. We've been told a variety of different things. We mark them absent, for instance, when they go out on quarantine, even though they're doing the online work and keeping up. So then we go back and we change and we do mark them as present as long as they're doing the online work. And so there's just been a variety of inconsistencies, I think, so far, and it seems to change almost weekly in how we're supposed to report and record these. So, you know, the administrators are doing the best they can in how to actually record these. And so that's why you're seeing a little bit of a variation, I think.
Okay, I think that explains it, and I understand it's tough to get an accurate count, but it just kind of struck me as being a little inconsistent, but I
Sure.
think you're probably spot on with that. So, okay, that was my only question.
Next piece that I have for you is an update. I think we're going to bring John Young in. John's going to talk about some of the data related to some of the things I just shared. Performance, you know, we just wrapped up the first semester, and so he has some pretty good data to share with you. And then I think also important to note, as I go through with the rest of the superintendent's report, obviously major changes last night. And so our district, all districts across the state are affected by this. John and his team put together a phenomenal, I believe, a pretty phenomenal plan for how we're going to move forward and address that online learning for the next 3 weeks. But I'm going to turn it over to John and let him start to cover both those areas with some detail for the board.
Thank you, Mr. Saunders. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me in this evening. Always a pleasure. Before I begin, I would be remiss if I didn't take an opportunity just publicly to thank our teachers for all the work and effort they've been putting in. They're just doing a fantastic job, and I know it's a struggle right now for them, and I really appreciate all the hard work they're putting in. I also be remiss if I didn't recognize, Chris Masano and Amanda Ersbaumer, who have been just putting in a tremendous amount of work as well at the administrative level, and how much I greatly appreciate their work. And as always, the support that we receive from the board and from Mr. Saunders is greatly appreciated as well. As we know, this is a unique time, and we have some unique circumstances. And so one of the things that we did is we began tracking our students' progress to determine, what kind of impact has the COVID situation had on our students in terms of their success rate as a student. And, clearly there's some factors that play into this. We have far more online students than we've ever had in the past. And then also we have hybrid for the first time. And so we wanted to look at the numbers and figure out how are those students doing as compared to our traditional face-to-face students. Now, clearly we don't have hybrid and online numbers for many years back because those weren't in position, but we do have the face-to-face numbers. And so what I did is I ran a 5-year comparison of first marking period failures to determine, what impact this was having on our students. And what we found is for our face-to-face students, there's relatively no change from COVID. We're up a little bit in terms of the number of overall failures. Currently, we have 101 students who failed one class or more on their schedule. Now, of that 101, that falls pretty close to what our 5-year average is. Last year, we had 99, 95 the year before that, 106 the year before that. So we're consistent in terms of the overall number of face-to-face failures. But what's alarming, and although alarming, not necessarily unexpected, is the level of struggle for our online students. Currently, our online students, 51% have failed one or more class. So, put that in perspective, better than half of our online students had at least one failure this marking period. Now, that's a very significant number. Although it's significant, it's not far out of line with the state's average. In fact, if you look, Michigan Virtual reports annually the percentage of failures across the board, and it traditionally hovers around that 50% mark. The last year that they have numbers completed for was the 2019 year, because 2020, obviously, with the way that 2019 ended, that year isn't fully in because of the shutdown, but 2018, I should say, is. And in that year, 54% of online students had failed a class. So it's pretty close to where we are right now. That number obviously increases when you have more and more students in an online class. So for example, Michigan Virtual reports that when they're failing 5 or more classes, that number is at around 51% of their students successfully pass a class. And so some pretty staggering numbers. Now, to put that in comparison, over the last 5 years, Marquette Senior High School has been around 90% of our online students passing. Now, keep in mind, those were students that, although they were online, the vast majority of them were actually still in a face-to-face classroom taking an online class. And it shows the significance of making connections with an adult in the school setting and how important that is. So we've been averaging over 90%. In fact, our numbers were so high that in 2018, we were invited to present at the online conference for the state to talk about the mentoring program that we have in place that helps support students and their success. This year, obviously, as more and more students go online, we're finding that they are struggling. And we also are struggling in the sense of not having the same number of mentors and things to work with those students. So right now, 51% of our online students are failing at least one class. When you look at failures of 2 classes or more, thankfully that number drops significantly. Only 14% of our students are failing 2 classes or more. So that's a good thing for us. What that shows us is that there's probably a class that they're really struggling with, or perhaps that overall online they're struggling, so they've decided to put less focus or less emphasis on one class. And that's probably why we see that 51% for the one class statistic. So what does this mean? What do we do to correct this? Our team got together and we talked about a few different things. We worked with our building leadership team as well and discussed, number one, let's change the way in which we record the marking period grade, because with COVID, we want to have some flexibility. We want to have some grace in there for students to be able to rebound from some of the early struggles that took place. Number one, not having everything in place from the start of the year, learning a new online system with Brightspace, some of the headaches that come with, the changing between face-to-face versus online, all of those different things that students struggled with from the beginning. So we wanted to find a way to offset some of those struggles and also address our issue. And so the first change that we made was to the way that our marking period grade is recorded. Typically, the first marking period would account for 40% of a student's semester grade. The second marking period would account for another 40%, and the exam would count for 20%. What we've elected to do is take the first marking period, second marking period, and exam and put them together into a total points. So what that does is that allows teachers to be more rigorous with assignments during the second marking period. Clearly, we will already have more activities, lessons, assignments, simply because we have our feet under us better now than what we did back at the very beginning. Also, the current marking period we're in is a week longer than the previous marking period. So with all of that in mind, there's going to be more assignments, there's going to be more tests, quizzes, other things along those lines. And so it will naturally give more emphasis to the second marking period without negatively impacting any of our students. So as a result, that grade hopefully will be more indicative of what they truly were able to achieve over the first semester, rather than being unbalanced and negatively impact based off of their first marking period grade. So that was the first change. But then some of the other changes that we're doing is understanding that the connection with an adult in our building is incredibly important. We've actually changed our Michigan virtual classroom where that online mentor will now mentor specific students that we identify off of the failure list to help support those students and address some of their struggles. Now, in the past, that Michigan virtual teacher would have been working with a classroom of about 20 to 25 students hour by hour. But this year, because we have so many students that are online outside of the building, they're really only working with a small number. And so by adding that targeted group, we're going to get a better use of that mentor over that time and hopefully better address some of those struggles for some of the students that are struggling in the independent online environment. Now, those students will be targeted towards our all online students that are 100% online. Second change that we're making is we're going to have our tutor position that used to be after school. We'd have a face-to-face tutoring session where students could come in, and we're going to change that position to an online position. But there we're going to utilize, again, targeted students. And so that individual will get a list of targeted students that they will meet with on a weekly basis to help address the individual needs of those students. And so as we see students be more successful, we hopefully will be able to move them off those targeted lists and then identify some of the other struggling students, clearly beginning with our most struggling students to begin with, and then working from there back. And then the last piece that we're doing different is our guidance counselors will also pick some targeted individual students. And so between the three levels, our Michigan virtual teacher, our after-school tutor, and then our counselors, each will identify those targeted kids and work to address those that are failing. Now, one of the other interesting things that we identified as we went through the numbers was the hybrid students. Following the hybrid schedule has been incredibly difficult. It's been a challenge for our teachers to keep track of when students should and should not be there. We've struggled with kids where they don't necessarily continue the work when they step outside of the classroom, and so they're often playing catch up. However, one of the positive things that we did notice, and I think this speaks to the importance of having that adult connection, is that our hybrid students only failed one class. That was at 15%. So 15% of our hybrid students failed one class or more. Now, in contrast, 51% for our online that are full online. So to me, that shows how significant and how important it is to have contact with the teacher during your school day. It's incredibly important for our students to have that contact. And so, we need to find ways to be able to do more of that for all of our students. So that addresses the numbers in terms of our failures and those kind of things. Obviously, we are in a position right now where we need to move to a remote learning platform for the next 3 weeks based off of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services most recent update. And so our goal in doing that is understanding that 15% of our hybrid students failed a class. We see that importance of making that connection on a regular basis with our teachers. And so what we're going to try to do is mirror our face-to-face schedule in an online environment. And so typically in a face-to-face environment, our students would have 7 hours, first through seventh hours. And that day would begin at 7:30 in the morning and would go through 2:23 in the afternoon. As we transition to the remote learning, we want to continue that connection. And so what we're going to do is we're going to follow that same schedule. So teachers will hold a Zoom session at the start of each hour. So at 7:30 in the morning, first hour would meet. At 8:22, second hour would meet, and so on through the schedule. And by keeping that synchronous aspect of it, we hold students accountable to be part of that and attend that. We also hopefully make that connection that's so important on the daily basis with our students. And then also we hope to address the questions and the uncertainty that comes when you're dealing in an online environment. The number one complaint that we have received so far from our online students is that they often have questions about how to complete a task or an assignment, and they have to ask those questions through email. And then it takes time for that teacher to get back through email. And then that lag creates this snowball effect for the students. And so hopefully by having that Zoom session, we'll be able to address some of those communication issues and conveyance of information so that we can be as efficient as possible and limit the need for follow-up emails and things along those lines. Now, the other aspect of that plan is we do still have our 2 remote days that are planned for next week. And so we will still have days where students will work independently and they won't necessarily have that same contact with the teachers. But on those independent work days, our teachers will still be pushing out lessons and activities, and the students would be working on those independently. And our teachers would have office hours where they would be available to answer student questions and concerns as we go. Now, clearly, where we are right now, moving into this environment over the next 3 weeks, we're going to continue to look at this and make decisions about what changes we need to make to continue to improve. What changes do we need to make to benefit our teachers? What changes do we need to make to benefit our students? And so as we get through that 3-week period, we'll evaluate this plan again and see what changes need to be made so that we can just continue to modify and improve things. Much like, Mr. Saunders' comment about how we will approach the COVID situation, I think we need to continually look back at our practices and determine what's working and what's not working and make changes where needed. So those are some of the things that are currently going on in the high school. I'd love to answer any questions that you might have at this time.
On the percentages, John, when you said 51% are failing one class, is that one or more classes or just one class?
So that's one class. 51% are failing one class. When you go to more than one class, that number drops down to 14%. And so we see a significant difference. And so as a whole, our students are doing okay. They're struggling in that one class.
Okay, is that the same for the hybrid?
Hybrid, we see it at 15%. The 2 or more, the number drops off even lower than that. It's considerably lower.
Oh, okay. Okay, because you had said in one of your comments that was one or more classes. So, okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
What does that 51% actually equal as far as number goes, number of students?
We have 94 students failing one or more classes.
And how many would you categorize as failure because of attendance issues rather than academic issues? And does that relate to when the class is held? For instance, early classes, are kids just not showing up?
So right now, our online program has been completely asynchronous. And so teachers are posting lessons out to the space daily. Students log in daily and work on those lessons. What we've noticed, and this is a trend across the state, really, each principal that I've spoken to at the high school level is seeing the exact same thing, is we have a significant number of students who are taking long absences and not logging in and doing any work at all. And so it might be 2 to 3 weeks before you see that kid again log in to check their work. We also see a significant number of students, because we're able to track this through our Brightspace. We see a significant number of the online students log in daily, but submit no work. And so I'm a little confused about that, because they're logging in and they're checking to see what work is out there, but they're not finishing that work and posting that work. And so those are some things that we're trying to have conversations about to target and address. And that's one of the things that we will be talking about with each of the groups that target those students, is how do we get that completion of activity through, because they're starting something but not completing something. Is that because they have questions? Is that because they aren't understanding the concept? Difficult to say at this point.
Are they logging in at different times than they normally would be doing work?
Yeah.
Kids turning in work at 7 at night, 8 at night. Is there a pattern?
Yeah, in fact, we see the bulk of our logins in the evening for online students. Yeah. One of the things that we did at the very beginning, we've actually held 2 of them now. We held Zoom meetings for all of our online and hybrid students to discuss the expectations. And one of the things we were very clear about is you need to set a schedule and you need to follow that schedule. And I think right now we're noticing that that's one of the struggles for students is they're not following a schedule. And it's easy for us. We all do that as adults at times where, we put something off for one day and one day quickly becomes, 7 days. And so getting them to stay on top of it is going to be an important part of this process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So John, you talked about now you're more or less mirroring that face-to-face environment, which I think is great. So there is a requirement. So you've communicated with the students that these are the new expectations, that they're kind of on a bell schedule, if you will.
Yeah, so tomorrow we have our normal advisory time. We're going to conduct a building-wide Zoom meeting where we'll have all of the students logged into Zoom through the classroom level, so it doesn't actually end up being 590 kids logged in at one time. It will actually be 54 classrooms instead logged in at one time. But we'll hold that meeting and go through the expectations. We feel that it's important that students hear a consistent message and that everyone understands, first and foremost, this is not like the closure in the spring of last year. This is a significant difference. Learning will continue, attendance is required, curriculum will continue just as it would have if you were in the face-to-face environment, grades will be given. It's important that students and families understand that. So we'll hold that building-wide Zoom for our students tomorrow. And then also tomorrow, once we put some finishing touches on our current communications, we have a letter that'll go out to all families, and included in that letter are links to all of the different documents that detail the information for families to be able to follow.
So previously the requirements were maybe a daily check-in, something like that, log in each day for each student, or were there requirements?
So for our face-to-face, they were actually conducting themselves as they would in a typical year. They would have been here at school. They would have been going through the normal bell schedule. For our online students, they would have been logging into Brightspace. It was asked of them to do this on a daily basis and complete any activities and lessons that were given for that day. One of the things, as we talked about already, we noticed is that they aren't following that same schedule. And so they often find themselves behind and then have to turn in multiple assignments in a very short period of time. And that's a compounding factor for them. So something we'll be working on to address with them.
Okay, very good.
I'm hopeful, by the way, that as we go online for the next 3 weeks, that some of those students who have been working independently online will be able to benefit from that transition of our face-to-face kids online, and that we might hopefully be able to correct some of those issues that were out there previously that teachers were dealing with.
Okay.
Thank you for your time this evening, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Saunders.
We're going to bring Mr. Tizio in next to give us an athletics update. Welcome, Alex.
Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for having me. Coming off of what ended up being a very, very busy fall, to do a quick recap, couldn't be happier about just how things went this fall. The behavior of our student athletes, coaches, fans, and at attendance at games once we got to that point. But at a quick glance, total across all of our fall sports that we had participating and competing, we had 50 total home events. And just looking back at who we were participating against, our regular season competition was against UP schools and kept us within the UP for the duration of those regular seasons. Cross country had 5 home meets, which was excellent, including a GNC and a UP finals meet that we hosted. Girls tennis had 12 home dates. Volleyball had 12 home matches, including 2 that were part of the district tournament that we hosted. Boys soccer between the varsity and JV teams hosted 12 contests. And football it had 9 home contests throughout our 3 levels. including our second ever home playoff game that we were fortunate to be victorious in. And also included in the 4 home varsity football dates, we also had our sideline cheer, our dance team, and our marching band also as participants for those contests. And so, as you can see, a very busy fall. And it was very clear from the onset that we were going to be heavily relied upon by other schools within the UP and within our local area to be, relied upon in hosting the amount of events that we ended up hosting. And feeling as good as I did about not only our coaches that we have in place to execute our return to activity plan, but also the support of Mr. Young. And he had also mentioned Mr. Masano and Ms. Ersbommer, having that support there as well, made me feel very good about our hosting environment and sticking true to the guidelines and protocols that we had in place for our participants. And so we ended up starting the year on a no spectator basis for our home volleyball matches. But then for our home outdoor sporting events, we started the year at a two spectator per participant policy that worked out very, very well. It was a slow open, if you will, but was a huge help in keeping our game environment under control, never letting things get out of hand, making sure that I could, effectively enforce the mask policy, as well as the importance of social distancing throughout our crowd space there. And again, I was surprised at how well things went and how folks just were happy to be there. And so that was great to see. And then another huge aspect of allowing this fall seasons to run as smoothly as they did were the Red SBN video streaming program led by Eric Hammerstrom and his students that broadcast all of our home sporting events through the NFHS network. And so that was a big help for anybody that was outside of that 2 spectator per student or student participant policy to be able to log in and view the competitions that way. So huge thanks to Eric Hammerstrom and his student crew. And then when it came to our pre-screening process and taking the temperatures of our student athletes on a daily basis, and as well as asking those pre-screening questions of any COVID-related symptoms, Terry Dalpier and her NMU nursing program students were there every day to assist us in that and helping us maintain, the adequate contact tracing records that we needed to on a daily basis. And so, in addition to those pre-screening questionnaires that we conducted every day with our student athletes, we're also keeping an adequate seating chart and a consistent seating chart for any bus trips that we were on. So students were sitting in the same seat on a bus both to and from any competition sites, and that was just another thing that we used to help, I guess, mitigate the contact that any of our student athletes were having while they were participating within those sports. So again, all in all, a great fall. We were more fortunate than most when it came to the amount of competitions that we were able to safely hold. But a lot of the success that we had, I very much attribute to the environments that our coaches put together, as well as the adherence and willingness to do the things that they needed to do from our student athletes. As we look forward to the winter sports season, obviously yesterday's announcement had a pretty profound impact on the start of our winter sports seasons with the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services making the decision that they had for Wednesday to be the start of that 3-week remote learning platform. But the MHSAA, just looking at the optics of, although that switch to remote learning isn't starting until Wednesday, would not be good optics at all to allow winter sports teams to be practicing today and tomorrow. So the MHSAA yesterday evening came out with the decision to suspend all activities, both practice and competition, through December 8th. And so fortunately for us, just based on the success that we had within a lot of our teams, most of our winter sports teams hadn't yet started their practice schedules. And so the only teams that we had actively practicing to this point have been our hockey teams, as well as the girls basketball teams. And so, they ceased their practice activity right with that decision. And, we'll be holding off here for 3 weeks. I will be a part of a MHSA Rep Council meeting on Wednesday. That'll kind of give us a lot more guidance as to what action to be taken for not only hopefully concluding the fall tournaments for those schools that are still competing in the sports of football, volleyball, and girls swimming and diving downstate. But we also do need to look at restart dates for those winter sports, taking a look at when practice will be able to resume, hopefully being on that December 9th date, but then competition as well. Couple plans that, we're expected to review and hopefully take action on. One of them will be either to, when practices resume on December 9th, allow schools that want to move forward with competition at that point as well. So not really having that opportunity to get reacclimated to mask wearing as part of participation and in those types of things. I think for me personally, I think there are a lot of concerns associated with resuming practice and competition both on that same date. I think we've got to give our student athletes a chance to get back into the groove and get that level of safe conditioning under their feet before we throw them right into competition. But the other proposal that we'll likely see is allowing teams to practice throughout the month of December before safely looking to start competitions the Monday that we return from the winter break, which would be Monday, January 4th. And so we'll be discussing those two options, hopefully taking action on one of them. And then in addition to hopefully taking action on one of those two proposals, taking a look at any scheduling reductions that may need to take place. If we keep the winter sports tournament dates the same, do we need to see any reductions in regular season competitions for a sport like basketball, hockey, to safely, adjust our schedules so that you're not overloading with 3 competitions every week to get to that end date? Or are we looking at a situation that would throw out the back end of the season a little bit more and extending things off the back end there into March? So a lot to go over there, but and I'm sure we'll be able to, through some healthy discussion, figure out a sound direction for the MHSAA and our member schools to be able to take at that point. But also in addition, just kind of taking a look at some likely travel restrictions and crowd size limitations that are also going to be a part of the winter sports seasons. At this point, I'm not planning on any overnight regular season trips for any of our winter sports. We've done one to this point with the football playoff game, and we were very fortunate to have that run safely and smoothly. But when we have these situations within our control, it's no doubt going to be the safest atmosphere to not have those regular season overnight trips taking place in order to further protect our ability to hold in-person education. And in addition to that, taking a look at any crowd size limitations, I think the crowd size limitations are going to be ultimately decided upon by the MHSAA, but it'll be interesting to see if they want to start the winter sports seasons off in a no spectator format, or if they want to hold to that 2 spectator per student athlete participant limitation that we had started the fall off with. And so, at that point, with no practices or competitions taking place in the next 3 weeks, it's going to be important for me to, coming out of Wednesday's representative council meeting, to really get on the ball and get on the ball quick with adjusting our schedules accordingly. I look forward to taking the lead here within the UP membership and making ourselves available and willing to host as many competitions as possible. I just feel best about our students' safety and the resources that we have here within Marquette Area Public Schools, and definitely want to make ourselves available to host anything and everything that we can without stretching those resources too thin. And then with added winter sports planning, it's going to be important for us to make sure that we have that same confidence in our return to activity plan that we had in the fall, that we've got that there for the winter as well, with volunteers that are needed as part of that pre-screening process, and also giving our coaches the confidence to safely get going within each of their sports so that we can not only start the season safely, but move through smoothly to the end of that postseason competition, whatever that looks like for that sport. And lastly, just cleaning up the fall seasons. Things kind of ended in a fast and furious manner. So a lot to go back into without being able to hold any in-person banquets or recognitions, even for our coaches and student athletes in that limited setting. You know, we're the only contact that we're able to do right now per the MHSAA is a virtual contact between our coaches and student athletes. And so we're holding all of our banquets in a virtual setting, but working with our coaches to make sure that we're doing something to help celebrate their seasons, all that we did, because there was an awful lot of effort being put into those schedules by not only our coaches and students, but their parents and guardians and other fans as well. But all in all, you know, couldn't be happier about how things progressed through the fall and where we're at now. But you know, also looking forward to continuing that solid experience that we had in the fall into our winter sports seasons as well. Does anybody have any questions?
Alex, I know we talked about this before. Obviously, your budget has been greatly impacted, and you know, losing gate concessions is on the negative side. But with the lack of travel that the teams have had to, I mean, how does that ultimately impact? Does it kind of a wash between all of them?
You know, I don't know that it's a clean wash. It might be a minimal loss. It's hard to tell exactly. But even taking a look on the football side, you know, not to isolate football, but we traditionally plan on at least 2 downstate trips during the regular season for the varsity team, let alone the JV and freshman teams as well. And so with those being road trips on a bus of, you know, anywhere from $1,000 if we're on a school bus, up through a very significant expenditure for a charter motor coach. You know, there's quite a bit of cost savings within that 6-game schedule that we were limited to, and not having those downstate trips aside from the 2 downstate playoff games that we had. But, you know, when you look at it across the board, volleyball had less road trips. And so to speak to your point specifically, you know, I don't know that it's the monumental loss that you would anticipate without that ticket gate revenue, as well as the concession fundraising opportunities for our sports. And so I think it's very, very close to a break-even fall season for us.
Okay, good. That's great. Any other questions for Alex?
I was kind of out of touch this last weekend. How'd you do this last weekend?
Our football team went down to Muskegon, competed in the district final game, and came up on the short end with a 47-21 final result there. But our boys competed and represented the school extremely, extremely well. You know, that's a storied program down there, but we had a little bit of a flat spot there in the second quarter and some early miscues that were the turning point in the game. But boys, like I said, competed extremely well in the second half, and we outscored them 7-6 in the second half. Yeah, they represented us very, very well.
That's great. At least we were there, hey?
Yeah. And, you know, the win over Mount Pleasant the week prior was a huge win for the program, kind of that turning point as we look to get over the hump mentally and get us used to having that success in the postseason tournament once we get downstate.
A lot of returning juniors too.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you, Alex.
Yes, thank you for the time.
Thanks for the update, Alex. Appreciate it.
Anything else, Bill?
No, sir.
Okay, we're going to move along then to item number 6, which is comments from the public. These are agenda items only. Linda, do we have anybody?
Yes, Ellie says there is someone in the queue.
Okay. Whoever that is, if you could just introduce yourself and then you have 5 minutes, up to 5 minutes of public comment.
Ellie, is this person still coming on?
No luck, Linda?
I'm checking with Ellie. She said they're in the meeting, but they're unmuted. We're trying to reach the person, but it
Right.
doesn't, they may not have a microphone, so I'm not sure what we're gonna do.
Okay. I mean, I'm happy to continue moving forward, and just let us know if you do find someone. We can certainly, insert them in the public comment for the agenda item. Otherwise, we can just wait till the final public comment at the end of the meeting too.
Did you hear that, Ellie? We're gonna let the person know. Ellie's gonna send them a chat.
Okay.
We will move on when after they respond. So let's move on now, and then we can
Yep.
always go back.
And just let us know, and we'll be glad to make some time for them too. And so we'll move on to item number 7, which is our consent agenda. I would entertain a motion to have that consent agenda approved.
I would make that motion.
Support.
Okay, I didn't catch who did the move on that. Glenn? All right, Glenn is supported by Mrs. Cambenzi. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, I caught myself. We need a roll call vote. Linda?
Yes, Rich Rossway,
Yes.
James Randall,
Yes.
Kristen Cambenzi,
Yes.
Dr. Brian Cherry,
Yes.
Glenn Sarka,
Yes.
Michael Kohler,
Yes.
Okay, motion passes. We will move on to number 8, board committee reports. We have appropriations. The chair is not with us tonight, Mr. Hewitt, so the honors go to Mrs. Cambenzi.
All right. Most of it was what we just went through with the audit, and we also talked about the snow removal bids, and what else did we talk about? I don't know.
I think that was it.
Yeah, I think those were the main things. The main thing we talked about was the audit, and we'll
Okay,
hopefully adopt that later or accept it or whatever.
all right, and then we do have the snow removal bids.
We'll be
Yep.
talking about snow removal bids anyway.
Yep.
Okay,
So that was it.
all right. We appreciate the brevity of that report. Item number 9, we have unfinished business, and again, we have policy, and it looks like Kristen is also in charge of that. So it looks like we do have a couple of policies for a second reading as well.
Yeah, we have the final reading of the truant policy for Title IX sexual harassment policy, which is new. And then so that would replace our old policy that we had. So I think we had talked about that at the last meeting. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions. The new policy is just pretty much to keep us more in line with the current laws, and make it easier for reporting and keeping track of what we should be doing. when we have instances of our, when we need to look into allegations.
Okay. So we will need a motion on these policies for approval.
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we approve the policy of sexual harassment.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Randall and supported by Dr. Cherry. And again, this is just on student policy number 2266. Title IX. Any other discussion on that policy? Hearing none, we will do a roll call vote. Linda?
Rich Rossway,
Yes.
James Randall,
Yes.
Kristen Cambenzi,
Yes.
Dr. Brian Cherry,
Yes.
Glenn Slarka,
Yes.
Michael Kohler,
Yes.
You have a nice echo going there, Linda.
I did notice that.
Hello, hello, hello. Okay, so now we need a motion on our second policy, Neola policy 5517. Did you want to make any comment on that, Linda? Kristen?
That's just rescinding and deleting the former policy that we had. So I don't know that we need, I don't think there's anything else.
I think the motion was actually to adopt the policy and rescind the other policy unless you
Okay,
feel we
all
need to
right.
go through it all again. I think we're covered.
Okay. All right, so now at least I know what I actually voted on. All right, so we're good with policy. So we'll move on to 9B, award snow ice removal for Market Senior High School and Sandy Knoll Elementary. I know we have a recap of the bids. There were a couple of actually quite close bids between the low bidder and the next one. Bill, did you want to kind of give an overview of that?
We approved the bids at the previous board meeting, and right before we approved the bids, we had a company drop out. In other words, asked to rescind their bids. In doing so, we had to look at the next low bids, reached out to the next low bid for the high school, which was actually Spodek. Because they already had 4 projects, they didn't want to take on, or four of the schools, they didn't want to take on a 5th. So it went to then the next low bid, which was Smith Paving. So the original low bid was Enright, $12,805. We're going to be looking at awarding to Smith at $17,125. Spodek was $16,434, but again, couldn't take on that 5th school. And then Sandy Knoll, the low bid was again Enright at $10,215. They pulled their bid right before the previous board meeting, so the next low bid was Smith Paving at $16,000 even. We were going to look to potentially purchase some of our own equipment and have some of our own custodians start to take on this, which I think in the long term is probably most beneficial to the district. But in looking at securing some equipment, be it lease or making a purchase this late in the game, we need to start setting that foot in motion for next year. So it's best that we award and have somebody in place to do that for this coming winter.
So that's a pretty significant, maybe I know why Enright dropped out, because of 10 grand versus 16. Do we have an actual budget for that, or what we expect to pay?
That budget has been going up every year. I think Deb would be better versed at giving you those numbers of what it is year over year. We've seen it continually slowly eke up, and that's just I think nature of folks covering their costs and maybe having employee and wage increases and other things that lead to those costs going up. And certainly we understand those costs go up when we do things like a new bus loop at a Bothwell Middle School or more paved area at a Sandy Knoll. We're in all likelihood going to run into a little bit more of that next year with the addition of the Marquette Senior High School parking lot project. We're likely to face some increases. We have some more surface area to deal with as well.
Okay. So we will need have a motion to award those bids.
I'll make a motion to award the bids as presented.
Support.
Moved by Mr.
Support.
Randall. Moved by Mr. Randall, support by Mrs. Combenzi, and a very late follow-up support by Mr. Cherry. So you don't get in on that one, Brian. Dr. Sherry, I'm sorry. Right, so we have a
Trying to
motion.
be sportive here.
We have a motion and support. If we don't have any other discussion, we will call the question. Linda?
Rich Rossway,
Yes.
James Randall,
Yes.
Kristen Cambenzi,
Yes.
Dr. Brian Cherry,
Yes.
Glenn Sarka,
Yes.
Michael Kohler,
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 6-0. Under new business, we heard the audit report earlier. Now we have to accept that audit report. So I would entertain a motion on that.
I'll make a motion that we accept the audit report.
All support.
Support.
Moved by Dr. Cherry, supported by Mr. Randall. Any discussion? Would we like to go through that report one more time, everybody?
Good.
Crickets chirping. Okay, we have a motion and support. If there's no other discussion, we'll call the question with the roll call vote. Linda?
Rich Rossway,
Yes.
James Randall,
Yes.
Kristen Cambenzi,
Yes.
Dr. Brian Cherry,
Yes.
Glenn Sarka,
Yes.
Michael Kohler,
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Item 10B, we have a first reading of board policy. So we will go back to Mrs. Combenzi, if you want to just give us a brief overview of that first reading.
All right, so this will be policy 8450.05, temporary remote work policy for Michigan Occupational Safe and Health Administration compliance. This is in part because of the new rules put forward by the health department. Just kind of explains that what is to be expected of our in-person work for employees to the extent that their activities can be feasibly completed remotely. So it just kind of defines some of the new stuff that is happening. I don't know, Bill, Mr. Saunders, do you have anything else more explanation about this?
Yeah, this is something put together by Troon for us. We had an option to go with Neola, an option to go with Troon. Troon policy was a little bit more detailed than the Neola policy. It is a MIOSHA requirement for every workforce, every workplace from a compliance standpoint. So as we're dealing with the epidemic of COVID, again, where it's feasible, we have to have a policy to allow those folks to be able to work from home if they're able to. So this clearly defines that for us. Certainly, if we're in a face-to-face setting, you can anticipate that we're still going to need workers on site to do some of those things. If we're in a remote setting, or if we have some folks, even if we are in a face-to-face setting, that reasonably can accomplish their tasks from home, then we need to consider and allow those folks to be able to do that. So that's what this policy really outlines for us.
Okay, thank you. So we will be having a second reading of that at our December
Yes.
board meeting.
Thanks, Kristen.
Okay, so moving on to item 11, gifts and bequests. We have a number of them. A donation from the United Way of Marquette County of 1,000 cloth masks. So we appreciate that. A donation from Range Bank of supplies from their school supply drive drop-off. I know there was quite a bit collected with that, so thank you to Range Bank. And also a donation from Mr. Jack Ledbetter of an 8-inch Schmidt cast grain telescope, which sounds incredibly expensive. So we thank Mr. Ledbetter for that donation. We're moving on now to item 12 and comments from the public general. Linda, or were we able to get a hold of the previous individual or anybody else?
I just checked with Ally and no one is in the waiting room right now, so it looks like we would move on.
Okay. Okay, then we will move forward with item 13, which is board member comments. We'll start with Mr. Kohler. If you have anything, Mike.
I do not.
Mr. Sarka?
I want to thank everybody for doing such a great job with so many challenges. I think we're doing very well considering everything that we're facing. Really appreciate the presentations tonight as well, and would have been nice to hear from the public, but I'm sure we will in another form. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sarka. Mr. Cherry?
None.
No comment on the Lions game this past weekend or the Packer game, or prediction on the Viking Bear game this evening?
They both got lucky, and we hope the Vikings pull off one.
All right, Mrs. Kimbenzi.
No comments.
Mr. Randall?
I'd like to congratulate our football team for managing to get where they got and doing such a great job, and Alex for really doing a great job for in-person sports, which is I think a monumental thing. Also, John Young's report was very enlightening as far as what they're doing to work with the failure rates. It sounds like they really got a pretty good plan in place, and hopefully it's gonna improve things a lot. And also the teachers that are. It goes on and said that they're doing a fantastic job. It's not a fun time for anybody, and we'll just have to get through this, and we'll be better for it. That's all.
Thank you, Mr. Randall. Item 14, board president comments. I guess I just echo your comments, Jamie, and really impressed with Mr. Young's grasp of the data and the plans moving forward. Obviously, this is changing daily, and really impressed with his knowledge of how this educational system of ours is changing right now with hybrid and online and per pupil. I think is pretty clear, as he stated, that the best thing that we can do for our students is to continue that teacher contact and move forward. So a big thank you to Mr. Young. Announcements and other meetings. Item number 15, our next meeting is going to be December the 14th at 5:30, more than likely electronically. And item 16, we do have an issue that we have to go into closed session for pursuant to the Open Meetings Act, considering employee medical leave. So we will need a motion and support to do that.
I'll make a motion that we go into closed session.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Randall, supported by Mrs. Kimbenzi. We have Linda.
Rich Rossway,
Yes.
James Randall,
Yes.
Kristen Cambenzi,
Yes.
Dr. Frank Sherry,
Yes.
Glenn Sarka,
Yes.
Michael Kohler,
Yes.
Okay, so now
Ally's opening us back up. I'll let you know when we're all set.
You don't have to keep repeating yourself, Linda.
We are all set.
Okay, so we are now back in open session. And I would entertain a motion regarding our employee medical leave.
I'd like to make a motion to approve employee 2020-1 continuance of the employee medical leave.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Kohler, supported by Mrs. Combenzi. Will that motion suffice, Linda?
Yes, that motion is fine.
Okay,
We do need to do a roll call, though.
so we have motion and support. Any discussion? We'll do a roll call vote, Linda.
Rich Rossway,
Yes.
James Randall,
Yes.
Kristen Cambenzi,
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Brian Cherry,
Yes.
Glenn Sarka,
Yes.
Michael Kohler,
Yes.
Rich froze up.
No.
It's the best he said in a
I know.
long
Okay,
time.
we got to run out quick. So motion passed 6-0, so we're back to a motion to adjourn.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Support.
Okay, I heard a motion from Mr. Kohler, supported by whoever. Okay, Linda will handle that. All right, call vote on adjournment, Linda.
Rich Rossway,
Yes.
James Randall,
Yes.
Kristen Cambenzi,
Yes.
Dr. Brian Cherry,
Yes.
Glenn Sarka,
Yes.
Michael Kohler,
Yes.
I think that's it, Rich.